What would you do if you woke up in the Alaskan wilderness to find a 600-pound grizzly bear and her cub standing just feet from your tent? Would you run? Would you scream? Would you pray that your last moments on Earth wouldn't be caught on your own trail camera? For wildlife photographer Marcus Webb, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was his reality on a cold September morning in Denali National Park. And what happened next? Well, it's a story that will change everything you thought you knew about these magnificent, misunderstood creatures. But before we dive into this incredible true story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming stories like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Marcus Webb wasn't your typical wildlife photographer. At 42 years old, he'd spent the better part of 2 decades chasing the perfect shot, from African elephants to Arctic wolves. But there was one subject that had always eluded him, one dream shot that kept him awake at night. A grizzly bear mother with her cubs in their natural habitat, capturing that raw, unfiltered moment of maternal love in the wild. You see, Marcus grew up in Seattle, about as far from bear country as you could get while still being in the Pacific Northwest. His father, a construction worker, had always dismissed his son's fascination with nature as impractical daydreaming. But Marcus's mother, Sarah, was different. She'd saved up for months to buy him his first camera when he was just 12 years old, a used Canon that changed his life forever. "Look through that lens, Marcus," she told him, her eyes sparkling with wisdom that only mothers possess. "And you'll see the world not as it is, but as it could be. You'll see the truth that most people miss." Those words had carried him through photography school, through years of rejection from National Geographic and the Wildlife magazine, through the moments when he wondered if his father had been right all along. But Marcus kept shooting, kept believing, kept searching for that one perfect image that would tell a story words never could. And then came September 2024. Marcus had planned this trip for 18 months. He'd studied bear migration patterns, consulted with park rangers, invested in the best camping equipment money could buy. He'd even spent 6 weeks training with a wilderness survival expert named Tom Reddick, a grizzled Alaskan native who'd survived 3 separate bear encounters. "Listen here, city boy," he'd growled during one of their sessions, his weathered face serious as stone. "Grizzlies aren't the mindless killing machines people make them out to be. They're protective, sure, territorial, absolutely, but they're also curious, intelligent, and believe it or not, capable of showing restraint. Respect them, and they might just respect you back, but never, and I mean never, get between a mama and her cubs." Marcus had taken those words to heart. He'd obtained all the necessary permits, informed the Park Service of his planned route, and set up camp in a designated area about 40 miles from the nearest road. It was remote, pristine, and, according to his research, right along a known bear corridor. The first 3 days were magical. He captured shots of caribou herds moving across Dolden valleys, of eagles soaring against impossibly blue skies, of landscapes so stunning they didn't look real. But no bears, not a single one. On the 4th night, as Marcus sat by his campfire eating freeze-dried beef stroganoff and wondering if this trip would be another expensive failure, he heard something that made his blood run cold. A branch snapping. Close. Too close. He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth, every muscle in his body tensing like a coiled spring. The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing into the darkness. And then he saw them. 2 amber eyes reflecting the firelight, watching him from the tree line about 50 yards away. But here's the thing. Marcus didn't panic. Years of training kicked in. He slowly set down his food, stood up carefully, and made himself appear larger, just as Tom had taught him. He spoke in a low, calm voice. "Hey there, bear. Just passing through. No trouble here." The eyes blinked once, twice, then disappeared back into the darkness. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. He lay in his tent, his satellite phone clutched in one hand and his bear spray in the other, listening to every sound the forest made. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, he felt like he'd aged a year in a single night. "Maybe Dad was right," he muttered to himself, brewing coffee with shaking hands. "Maybe this is crazy. Maybe I should pack up and go home." But something kept him there. Call it intuition, call it stubbornness, call it destiny. Marcus decided to give it one more day. He spent that 5th day setting up his trail cameras in strategic locations, hoping to capture footage even when he wasn't actively shooting. He found fresh bear tracks near a salmon stream, massive prints that made his heart race with equal parts fear and excitement. These weren't just any bear tracks. These were the tracks of a large adult, and next to them, smaller prints, a mother and her cub. That night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He set up his main camera on a tripod outside his tent, positioned to capture the clearing where he'd seen those tracks. He programmed it to record on motion detection, then retreated to his tent, knowing that if the bears returned, he'd have footage, even if he was too terrified to shoot it himself. He fell asleep sometime around midnight, exhausted from the day's hiking and the previous sleepless night. His dreams were a confused jumble of bears and cameras, of his mother's encouraging smile and his father's disappointed frown. And then, just as the first light of dawn began to creep across the Alaskan wilderness, Marcus woke up to a sound that turned his blood to ice. Breathing. Heavy, rhythmic breathing right outside his tent. His eyes snapped open and his body went rigid. The thin fabric of his tent, which had seemed so sturdy when he bought it, suddenly felt like tissue paper. He could hear something moving out there, something big, shuffling around his campsite. And then came the sound that made his heart nearly stop. A low rumbling growl, followed by a higher-pitched sound, a cub's chirp. The mama bear and her baby were in his camp. Marcus's mind raced. Every piece of advice Tom had given him flooded back. Don't make sudden movements. Don't make eye contact if you can help it. Never get between mother and cub. Make yourself small if they're aggressive. Make yourself big if they're just curious. But what do you do when you're trapped in a tent? He could hear them more clearly now. The mother was sniffing around his food storage, which, thank God, he'd properly secured in a bear-proof container 50 feet from his tent. I heard the sound of metal scraping against rock as she tried to get into it, then a frustrated grunt when she couldn't. Marcus barely dared to breathe. His satellite phone was within reach, but what good would it do? By the time help arrived, whatever was going to happen would have already happened. Minutes passed like hours. The sun continued to rise, gradually illuminating the tent's interior with a soft orange glow. Marcus could now see shadows moving outside, large shadows. His trail camera was still recording. At least if the worst happened, there'd be evidence. His story would be told. Then something unexpected happened. The cub, curious as young animals always are, wandered over to Marcus's tent. He could see its shadow against the fabric, small and rounded, cautious yet bold in the way only children can be. The cub sniffed at the tent, and he heard a sound he'd never expected to hear in such a terrifying moment. The cub was playing? It pawed at the tent door, making a chirping sound that was almost playful. And then Marcus heard the mother's response. Not an aggressive roar, but a gentle chuffing sound. She was calling her baby back, but not in alarm. In patience. Marcus made a decision that was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, probably both. Moving with agonizing slowness, he reached for his camera. Not the one outside, but his backup, the one he kept in his tent for quick shots. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it twice. He positioned himself near the tent's mesh window, a small section that offered ventilation and a limited view of the outside world. And through that small window, with the morning sun now painting everything in shades of gold, Marcus saw something that took his breath away. The mother grizzly was magnificent. Her fur caught the light like spun copper, and she moved with a grace that belied her massive size. She wasn't aggressive or threatening. She was simply there, being a mother. And her cub, a ball of fluff that couldn't have been more than 6 months old, was exploring the world with the innocent curiosity of all young creatures. Marcus raised his camera and began to shoot. For the next hour, Marcus remained frozen in position, documenting something extraordinary through his small tent window. But as the sun climbed higher and the reality of his situation became clearer, a new problem emerged. He needed to move. Not much, just enough to prevent his legs from cramping, to shift his weight, to remain capable of reacting if things went wrong. But every tiny movement made the tent fabric rustle, and every rustle made the mother bear's ears swivel in his direction. She knew he was there. Of course she did. Bears have an incredible sense of smell, and there was no way she hadn't detected his presence. But she wasn't attacking. She wasn't even acting threatened. She was simply keeping one eye on the tent while going about her morning routine with her cub. This was the struggle that Marcus found himself in. Not a physical battle for survival, but a test of patience, of trust, of respecting boundaries that couldn't be crossed. He was witnessing something precious, something rare, but he was also acutely aware that one wrong move could turn this magical moment into a tragedy. The cub, meanwhile, was completely unconcerned with the strange fabric den in the clearing. He was more interested in a log he'd discovered, rolling it over with surprising strength for such a small creature, looking for insects and grubs underneath. Every few minutes he'd chirp to his mother as if to say, "Look what I found!" And she would respond with that same gentle chuffing sound, the bear equivalent of, "Yes, dear, very impressive." Marcus watched through his viewfinder, capturing shots he knew were once in a lifetime. The way the morning light caught the mother's eyes, showing intelligence and wariness, but not malice. The way the cub tumbled over his own paws, still learning how to coordinate his growing body. The tender moment when the cub ran back to his mother and she bent down to nuzzle him, a gesture of affection that transcended species. But then, something changed. The mother bear stopped what she was doing and lifted her head, her nose testing the wind. Her entire posture shifted from relaxed to alert in an instant. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Had he made a noise? Had the wind shifted, carrying his scent more strongly? No. She was looking away from him, toward the western tree line. And then Marcus heard it too. The sound of something large moving through the forest. Another bear, perhaps? A male, drawn by the scent of the mother and cub? Male grizzlies were known to kill cubs that aren't their own, a brutal reality of nature that forced mothers to be constantly vigilant. The mother made a sharp barking sound, and the cub immediately ran to her side. She positioned herself between her baby and whatever was coming, and Marcus saw her transform from a peaceful creature going about her morning routine into a defensive force of nature. Her finger hovered over the camera's shutter button, but he'd stopped shooting. This felt too intimate, too private. This was a mother protecting her child, and somehow it felt wrong to document it. The sounds from the forest grew closer. Marcus could hear heavy footsteps, now branches breaking under considerable weight. The mother bear's lips pulled back slightly, showing teeth that could tear through flesh like paper. And then, breaking through the tree line, came a moose. A massive bull moose, probably weighing close to 1,400 pounds, with antlers that spread like tree branches against the morning sky. The relief Marcus felt was overwhelming. But the mother bear wasn't relieved. She was still on high alert. Moose could be dangerous too, especially during mating season, and she wasn't taking any chances with her cub nearby. The standoff lasted maybe 30 seconds, though it felt like an eternity.
The moose assessed the situation, decided 2 bears and a human-smelling tent weren't worth the trouble, and veered off in a different direction. As the sound of the moose crashing through the undergrowth faded, the mother bear visibly relaxed. She chuffed to her cub again, and Marcus could swear the sound was different this time, reassuring, comforting. The danger had passed. But something else had happened too. In that moment of shared tension, as all 3 of them, man, bear, and cub, had watched the potential threat together, something shifted. The mother bear turned and looked directly at Marcus's tent, not with aggression, not with fear, but with what Marcus could only describe as acknowledgement. She'd known he was there all along, and she decided he wasn't a threat. What happened next is the part that still brings tears to Marcus's eyes when he tells the story. The mother bear did something completely unexpected. She sat down. Right there, in the clearing, maybe 20 feet from Marcus's tent, she settled her massive body onto the ground with a contentment that seemed almost human. And her cub, taking this as an invitation, scrambled up onto her back and began to play, sliding down her fur like she was a living playground. And Marcus watched in wonder as the cub climbed and slid, making happy chirping sounds that filled the morning air. And the mother just sat there, occasionally turning her head to check on her baby, but otherwise allowing herself to simply exist in this moment of peace. It was then that Marcus understood something profound. This mother bear had made a choice. She had assessed him as she would assess any other element of her environment and had decided that this particular morning, in this particular place, there could be coexistence. She was teaching her cub something invaluable. Not all threats are real. Not all unknown things are dangerous. And sometimes the world can be gentle. Marcus lowered his camera and just watched, letting tears stream freely down his face. Here he was, a man who'd spent 20 years chasing the perfect shot, and he was experiencing something no photograph could ever capture, a moment of pure connection across the species divide. The cub, growing tired from his playing, eventually curled up against his mother's side. She wrapped one massive paw around him, and within minutes, they were both dozing in the warm morning sun. And Marcus? He sat in his tent, his camera forgotten, and felt something inside him shift. All his life, he'd been chasing images, chasing approval, chasing that one perfect shot that would prove his worth to his father, to the world, to himself. But watching this mother bear with her cub, he realized that the perfect shot wasn't about technical excellence or rare circumstances.
It was about truth, about witnessing life as it actually is, beautiful, dangerous, tender, and wild, all at once. He thought about his own mother, gone now for 5 years, and how she'd always seen the good in him, even when he couldn't see it himself. She'd taught him to look for beauty in unexpected places, to find the story beneath the surface. And here, in this clearing in Alaska, with a grizzly bear and her cub sleeping peacefully 20 feet away, he finally understood what she'd been trying to tell him all along. We're all just trying to protect what we love. We're all just trying to teach our children how to survive in a world that can be harsh. We're all just looking for moments of peace in the wilderness. Time passed differently in that clearing. Marcus had no idea if they slept for 20 minutes or 2 hours. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, and a gentle breeze rustled through the spruce trees. Occasionally, the cub would stir, and the mother would shift slightly to keep him secure. It was the most ordinary and extraordinary thing Marcus had ever witnessed. Eventually, the mother bear awoke. She stood, stretching in a way that reminded Marcus of a house cat, and nuzzled her cub awake. The little one protested with sleepy chirps, not wanting to leave this comfortable spot. But Mother knew best. It was time to move on, to continue their journey through the wilderness, to find food and teach important lessons about survival. Before they left, the mother bear did something that Marcus still can't fully explain. She turned toward his tent one last time and made a sound, not aggressive, not warning, but something else. Something that, if Marcus had to put words to it, sounded like acknowledgement, maybe even thanks, though that seems impossible. Then she and her cub walked away, disappearing into the forest as silently as they'd arrived, leaving Marcus alone in the clearing with a memory he knew would stay with him forever. Marcus stayed in his tent for another 20 minutes after they left, making sure they were truly gone and processing what had just happened. When he finally emerged, his legs cramped and his body stiff, the clearing looked exactly as it had before. Peaceful, ordinary, giving no sign that something extraordinary had just occurred there. Except for the tracks. Deep impressions in the soft earth near his tent, proof that it hadn't been a dream. He walked over to his main camera, the one he'd set up on the tripod the night before, and checked the footage. Everything was there. Hours of recording showing the mother bear's arrival, her inspection of his camp, the cub's playful curiosity, the moose encounter, and those precious moments of them resting together. But as Marcus reviewed the footage, he made another decision. He saved the files, backed them up to 3 separate drives, but he didn't immediately share them with the world. Instead, he sat with them, watched them alone, and thought about what they meant. This wasn't just content for his portfolio. This was a responsibility. When Marcus finally returned to civilization a week later, he was changed. His fellow photographers noticed it immediately. There was something different in his eyes, a calmness that hadn't been there before. He'd gone into the wilderness chasing something external, recognition, success, the perfect shot. He'd come back having found something internal. Purpose, peace, and a profound respect for the wild things of this world. He eventually did share his footage, but not in the way he'd originally planned. Instead of selling it to the highest bidder or using it to boost his own career, Marcus partnered with wildlife conservation organizations. The video became part of a larger educational campaign about coexistence with bears, about understanding their behavior, about respecting their space. People fear what they don't understand, Marcus explained in interviews. They see bears as monsters, as threats, as obstacles to human expansion into wild spaces. But what I learned that morning in Alaska is that bears are just parents protecting their children, just creatures trying to survive, just beings looking for a little peace in a chaotic world. They're not so different from us. The response was overwhelming. The video was viewed millions of times, but more importantly, it changed conversations. Park services reported that visitors were approaching bear safety differently, with respect rather than just fear. Donations to bear conservation increased. People started to see these magnificent animals not as enemy combatants in a battle for territory, but as neighbors worth protecting. Marcus's father, who'd always dismissed his son's career choice, called him for the first time in 3 years. "I saw your video," he said gruffly. "Your mother would have been proud." It was the closest thing to approval Marcus had ever received from him, and it meant everything. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from Tom Reddick, the wilderness expert who'd trained Marcus. "You did something few people ever manage, city boy. You looked a grizzly in the eye and saw past your fear to the truth beneath. That bear trusted you with her most precious treasure, her cub. Don't take that responsibility lightly." Marcus never did. He continued photographing wildlife, but his approach changed. He was less interested in rare shots and more interested in true stories. He became an advocate for responsible wildlife tourism, for protecting habitats, for teaching people that the wildness of this world is worth preserving, not despite its danger, but because of its authenticity. Today, Marcus Webb leads photography workshops in Alaska and across North America. But they're not just about camera settings and lighting techniques. They're about respect, patience, and understanding. He teaches his students to see wildlife not as subjects to be captured, but as lives to be witnessed and honored. Every animal has a story, he tells them, usually while showing that video of the mother bear and her cub. Every creature is fighting its own battles, protecting its own loved ones, trying to make its way in this world. Our job, as photographers, as storytellers, as humans sharing this planet, isn't to conquer or control. It's to observe, to learn, and to share what we learn in a way that builds bridges instead of walls. The mother bear and her cub are still out there somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness. The cub is probably grown now, possibly with cubs of his own. Marcus likes to imagine that somewhere in that young bear's memory is a hazy recollection of a morning spent in a sunny clearing, feeling safe enough to play, to sleep, to simply be. He wonders sometimes if that cub will grow up to be as wise and discerning as his mother, able to assess threats accurately, to protect fiercely when needed, but also to recognize moments when the world can be gentle. Marcus's journey from that scared photographer in a tent to the man he is today wasn't just about a bear encounter. It was about learning to trust in something bigger than himself, to find courage in vulnerability, to understand that the most powerful moments in life are often the quietest ones. He keeps a framed photo in his office, not from that morning, but from his childhood. It's the picture his mother took of him with his first camera, eyes wide open with wonder and possibility. Below it, he's added a quote that he wrote himself. "The wilderness doesn't need us to tame it. It needs us to be brave enough to let it teach us." Since that September morning, Marcus has had other wildlife encounters, other close calls, other moments of breathtaking beauty. But nothing has quite matched those hours in the clearing with the mother bear and her cub. It was the moment everything changed. The moment he stopped being afraid of not being enough and started understanding that being present was enough. And here's the beautiful thing about that experience. It's not unique to Marcus. Every single day, somewhere in this world, a moment of unexpected connection happens between humans and wildlife. A whale breaching near a boat, its eye seeming to hold intelligence and curiosity. A deer allowing a hiker to walk past without fleeing. A fox
sitting near a campfire, drawn by curiosity rather than food. These moments happen when we set aside our preconceptions, our fears, our need to control everything around us. They happen when we remember that we're not separate from nature. We're part of it. And the animals we shared this world with are not obstacles or threats or resources. They're fellow travelers, fellow parents, fellow beings trying to navigate the beautiful complexity of existence. The mother bear in Marcus's story didn't attack because she didn't need to. She taught her cub a valuable lesson that morning. Not every strange thing is dangerous. Not every unknown situation requires aggression. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply exist peacefully alongside something you don't fully understand. It's a lesson humans could stand to learn too. If this story touched your heart the way it touched Marcus's life, I want to ask you to do something. Don't just scroll past. Take action. First, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week. True tales of courage, connection, and the incredible bond between humans and the animal kingdom. Second, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who's afraid of the wilderness, or someone who's forgotten the magic that exists in the natural world, or someone who just needs a reminder that beauty and grace exist in unexpected places. Third, consider supporting wildlife conservation in your area. Whether it's a donation, volunteering, or simply educating yourself about the animals you share your environment with, every action matters. Because here's the truth that Marcus learned that September morning in Alaska. We're all in this together. The bears, the moose, the eagles, and us. We're all just trying to protect what we love and find moments of peace in the wilderness. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we realize that the wilderness isn't something out there to be conquered. It's something inside us to be remembered. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and never stop looking for the beauty in unexpected places.